We are hosting this webinar, which is a global consultation to get prepared for the second Global Refugee Forum and enhance disability inclusion in the pledges. So before going to the agenda, I want to request my colleague Alexandra to give us a quick briefing about accessibility features of this webinar and making sure that everyone can participate and access the webinar as much as possible. Alexandra, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Elha. Dear all, my name is Alexandra. I'm going to briefly explain some of the technical features of today's call. This webinar is being recorded. There is international sign interpretation, captioning in English, and language interpretation in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. A CC button on the bottom of your screen will enable you to close captions. If you need captions in the external window, the link is in the chat box. The interpretation button on the bottom of your screen, present as a globe, will allow you to access specific language channel. Please choose your channel that you will be following throughout the meeting. The participants do not have an option of opening the microphone and video. Should you have questions, kindly leave them in the Q&A section or in the chat box. Our team is monitoring the chat box and will try to respond to questions during the event where possible. We request all speakers to kindly keep to times and keep their cameras off if not speaking. Thank you and have a good meeting.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. I'm following your instructions and now turning my camera on again. So I hope everyone can access the webinars in the language of their choice, Spanish, French, and Arabic. If you face any issues, please flag it in the chat. If you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we are monitoring the chat. So as I said, the goal of the webinar today is to discuss how we can make the second Global Refugee Forum more disability inclusive. For this purpose, we first going to look at the pledges made so far and the updates provided on the pledges in the first Global Refugee Forum, which happened in 2019. My colleague Ricardo will take us through the pledges that have happened in 2019. What was the situation in disability inclusion? Give us some examples and lessons learned about how inclusive they were or how they could be more inclusive. And then I will discuss some of the priorities that we have identified so far during the consultations that we have organized since last year about what are the priorities and what do we want the new pledges to focus on. And then, of course, we will have a lot of time for questions, comments, updates from your side. So please feel free to jump in and share your views. Because this is meant to be an interactive, participatory opportunity, a consultation for you to share your experience, your questions, and your suggestions. All right, so without further ado, first of all, of course, I want to invite Julius, who is a successful refugee with disability. He's now in Sweden and is also the part of the Global Advisory Board for UNHCR. Julius will give us some introductory remarks. Julius, please go ahead.
Thank you, Eham, and the rest of the team. I will keep my remarks very short and brief because of time constraint. First, I will be talking about the significance and opportunity to address discrimination and exclusion against refugees with disability in the upcoming GRF, Global Refugee Forum. I think that it will be an opportunity for us all to raise our voice, support each other, and meet some government and some donor to pledge, not only pledge, but also fulfill their pledges, so that not only refugee-led, disabled refugee-led organization, but also DPO can get the funding needed in order to reach out to newcomers with disability, as we call it, which is refugees with disability. I also think that the civil society and other stakeholders has a very big role to play, especially the civil society. They need to be our partners, and the stakeholders like donors and policymakers. We need to convince them. As I would like it, the message, we should focus more on the new convert, those who are not yet on our side. And those who are on our side, we should encourage them to bring more actors on our side. And then our expectation is that we don't just go there lobby for people to pledge, but we should also make it a continuous process to see that the pledges are actually redeemed by those who really pledge it. And my own experience of participating in the first Global Refugee Forum, I can say that it was not meaningful participation. I just found myself there just wandering around, and yeah, there was little to do. But now I can tell you that I'm really involved in the from the early stage. I make sure that during the selection of refugee expert, although it's a progress, not satisfactory, but it's a progress compared to the last one. So I will really love that we all make sure our partners, our friends, new convert, everybody pledge to this mega pledge and redeem them as well. We went there as a team to make sure that our voices are heard. We are participating. We are not just going there to just as a tourist, but this time around, the refugee expert we invited in the various fields, like to give their own opinion and really voice out their grievances. And yeah, to me, that is like meaningful participation. But as I said, it's not yet enough. 4 or 5 is nothing compared to the numbers that are coming. But I think we've learned some lessons. Maybe in the next one, we'll go again better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julius. Indeed, I hope that the progress, as you mentioned, is quite clear and visible for all of us. I was also part of the first Global Refugee Forum it was my very first days working with IDA, and I'm looking forward to see significant progress in the second Global Refugee Forum. So thank you for that, and we look forward to hear more from you during the event. So now I want to invite my colleague Ricardo Placatero from UNHCR. Ricardo is responsible for disability inclusion in the protection division of UNHCR. Ricardo is going to tell us about the first Global Refugee Forum, the pledges made, lessons learned, and some of the examples of the pledges made, so we can grow through them and see what has worked well, what could work better, and what are the gaps and opportunities for future pledges. So Ricardo, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you, Elham, and thanking as well the International Disability Alliance for organizing this, to Julius for being here, as well as a member of the advisory board for UNHCR towards the Global Refugee Forum. And thank you all for being here. I see some names, some people whom I know, and it's a pleasure to see that you are taking time to join us again. But I see as well new names, and this is a very good news. We have been reaching more and more people interested in this kind of a snowball effect. and it's very good news. Also to share that I have asked permission to the organizer to give the possibility as well to raise hand, and then we can activate your microphone, and it's a function that we have enabled. So it would be good if you want to participate as well by sharing, not only in the Q&A. The Q&A is fine, but if you want as well to use the microphone, you're welcome, because we want this to be a consultation, a dialogue, a brainstorming moment on how we can all of us advocate together for better inclusion in the main objectives of the Global Compact of Refugees and the Global Refugee Forum. With this, I'm going to share the screen. I hope I won't do a very boring presentation. We've tried to come with some actual content on analysis of how pledges are represented in the Global Compact on Refugee in the website, on the historic, let's say, of pledges, what are new developments, and as well, what are the strategic directions that the Global Refugee Forum is taking. Okay, and then we will open the floor. We have taken some examples as well from pledges, anonymizing them. We hope this is respectful, and we try not to make organizations identifiable unless it was for a very good reason, for a good practice. But please, if bilaterally, if you think that any of the examples shouldn't be shared, you can as well reach out bilaterally. This is the first time that we do this exercise. In any case, the pledges are publicly available as well. We will see there's a website where you can check as well the pledges that have been done in the past. So we have an update on preparations towards the 2023 Global Refugee Forum, and moving the slides, now there is an analysis of how disability inclusion, the rights of refugees with disabilities, asylum seekers with disabilities was reflected in pledges so far. There is a table now that reflects, it's a table that we've used in the past because it's the results that we had after the 2019 Global Refugee Forum. There were 1,400 pledges, so 1,400 pledges, 1400, a lot of pledges. And we did an analysis at the time, stock taking, on the level of focus that it had on child rights, youth rights, rights of older persons, gender, disability, and as well sexual orientation and gender identity. So going only, the table summarizes the numbers for all of these. I'm going to focus only on the disability one for the sake of time, but if you have questions on others, I can try to address them. For disability, we had only 7 out of 1,400 who were disability focused, who had a very marked objective on addressing the rights of persons with disabilities. 36 were considered disability inclusive because there was some mention. Some of them were very different levels. Some of them may have a very light mention of persons with disabilities among other groups. Others had a specific mention, but they were mainstreamed into a wider pledge on child protection or asylum procedures. That means that 1,357 pledges did not have any mention to disability at all. The ones that were considered having some mention were only 3% of all pledges. So it's a very low consideration, right? If we go in detail into the analysis, only 4 states, and we know that the main responsibility of addressing the protection of refugees, asylum seekers, and ensuring as well solutions that include return, reintegration, third country solutions with resettlement. Those main stakeholders, only 4 states shared disability-related or focus pledges, and then 12 more mention disability across other factors. So we have around 16 states with some level of responsibility, which is as well quite low, significant, of course, but this is still very low. Now, we will see some examples in a minute, but I wanted to move first on how the situation has evolved. So in 2023, we have a new platform, and the graphic looks a little bit different because there is a platform that allows us to do a little bit more of close monitoring on how pledges have been updated, because there was an express opportunity in 2021 for the high levels official meeting. It was an interim stock-taking exercise that happened 2 years after the Global Refugee Forum to review the progress of the commitments made at the first forum. And I'm realizing now that many people may not be aware of what is the forum. We are starting to have new people, but I hope that by the end of this briefing, we will have that answer addressed, just that question addressed, not to anticipate or to break the flow. Now, the stock-taking exercise allowed states, NGOs, civil society organizations, academia who had made commitments for the protection of refugees according to the objectives of the Global Compact, to provide an update on how they were performing, if they were completing their pledges, if they were progressing well, providing some as well details, a narrative report on how they were doing. And there was an opportunity to do a tagging exercise. You could select in a number of tags if your pledge was contributing to advance the rights of refugees with disabilities. You would mark that one for children as well, women, and you could include some wording in the narrative. There was an age, gender, and diversity section, and reporting officers, people who was in charge of reporting on behalf of their own organizations, could share some information. Now, the results that we have is one significant aspect is that the pledges increased. There was 1,700 pledges. So there was a 300 pledges increase. It is not very high. Why? This is one of the key messages that we have for this Global Refugee Forum as well. The efforts that the organizing team is putting forward is not to increase a lot in the number of pledges, but increasing the quality pledges. Many of the pledges have not been fulfilled because they were not specific enough, because they didn't have indicators, because they were not measurable, because they didn't have resources. They were commitments, but made without sufficient resources. So there was an exercise for matching, trying to connect people who were raising a commitment without resources, and other raising or sharing resources, but without substantive commitments on them. So try to make this matching exercise and reduce the number of pledges to ensure that there was a good reflection on them. This is going to be the same for this Global Compact, this Global Refugee Forum. There is a request to think if we can join other pledges, and we will see how this can work, or develop new pledges on areas that are really under reflected in progress, okay? So 1,700 pledges, and from those 115 pledges were disability inclusive. Now, what does it mean? They tagged in this system, they could report that the pledge was relevant for persons with disabilities. And this is 6.7 of all pledges. So we have an increase, pledges increased, but as well, the number of pledges being relevant for persons with disabilities. However, there was no new pledge made on disability inclusion. Okay, so this is another question to consider. Now we're going to move to examples. We want to show the slide has a pledge and an extract of the update. Okay, and I want us to reflect, and if you want, you can use the chat as well. I will read them and reflect if we think that this is a good practice, if this could be improved, how it could be improved, and to enter into a brainstorming or an open dialogue. Now, the pledge was made by states, so it's a joint state pledge. That means that several states committed to this, and it read participation and further inclusion of refugees with disabilities in all stages of humanitarian action. So it doesn't focus in any of the objectives of the Global Compact, and we will resume them, but in brief would be ensuring self-reliance, ensuring capacity, asylum capacity, so release or ease burden from host countries, then ensuring integration and as well solutions, so return to country of origin or third country solutions. Now, the pledge could be cross-cutting, right? It's focusing on a particular right of persons with disabilities that is participating. So I'm sharing an analysis a little bit, and the update, the 22 update, we see that the states supported a comprehensive mapping exercise for services available to people with disabilities in or within Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. So we see a key area for ease pressure of host countries, but self-reliance as well, more integration, ensuring the protection of refugees with disabilities in a refugee context, such as in Cox's Bazar, and something that is quite crucial, that is conducting a mapping exercise, right? Which services are available, what is missing, and engaging different stakeholders in that exercise, and using funding from this joint state pledge to conduct it. If we read in detail, we see as well that some of these states requested, and some of you may have been involved, we were involved in particular, for example, as UNHCR, they requested their partners, their implementing partners or funded partners, to conduct an action plan on how they were going to address the rights of persons with disabilities and include them in the refugee response to reflect the needs reflected in the mapping. So if you or your agency was asked to draw that action plan, you may know that this is coming from here. This is coming from a commitment made at the Global Refugee Forum and through an action, but having a consequence as well in funded partners. Okay, I would like you to reflect a little bit, and then we can see what is your opinion in terms of, was this a good practice? Did it have any impact? I see colleagues as well joining from Bangladesh, so it would be very interesting to hear their opinion about this. We're going to go through all the exercises, and then we can open a little bit for contributions. The second pledge that we want to see is, now it has an anonymized bracket. It says entity aggregates contribution on protection. So it's just a very broad, wide title. But the 2021 updates said on March 21st, the entity adopted the strategy for persons with disabilities in capital letters, which aims to ensure that people with disabilities, including refugees, can experience full social and economic inclusion, on an equal basis with others and live free from discrimination. So just a description, we have a very broad, not disability-oriented pledge. is made as well by a state, multi-state entity. And we see in the update that instead of having something more tangible, as for example, conducting a mapping exercise and reading further, we see that it had consequences as well in framework agreements, having an action plan, if you wanted to continue the agreement that you had. Here we have more of a statement. There was a strategy that could be very influential, of course, being a multi-state type of entity, on bringing equality between persons with disabilities who are national of those states and refugees. So it's integration is as a point of integration, but it could be as well as a host country. Some of those are host countries to equal benefits and rights between refugees and nationals. But on the other hand, we see a lack of consequences or tangible consequences, right? If we read more in the pledge, we could see that there was as well a monitoring of a disability marker. So how much was invested or committed as well at the minimum on disability inclusion, but we cannot know how much of this was benefiting refugees, which were the programs specific that were addressed to refugees. Okay, I'll leave it there. If you want to keep reflecting, we are going to see 5 examples. Okay, so we are in the second one, moving to the third. So the pledge now reads 100%. So all of the entity refugee operations will undertake a rapid gender analysis. So we see that it is a commitment related to gender, conducting a gender analysis. So it's not specific to disability. However, in the tagging exercise that I mentioned before, it mentioned persons with disabilities. The update reflected that the rapid gender analysis provide essential information about gender roles and responsibilities, capacities and vulnerabilities, together with programming recommendations. So it is a wide statement that does not mention in particular which could be the impact of gender dynamics, roles, responsibilities on women, girls, men, and boys with disabilities, which could be the additional risks, nor what are the results of those analyses, or where we can access more information, right? Can we access the mapping, or can we know what was the consequence of running those analyses, as we knew, for example, for the first pledge? Leave it here, almost done. Here is a shorter pledge, but there is an image that I will describe. And we selected this one because it's a good practice. As you know, disability as a factor for discrimination intersects with gender. We saw as an example, but it can intersect with other factors such as age, and in this case, with children. So we have a mainstream pledge that says early childhood development and education media content. So developing early childhood or content for education and early childhood development, an activity that is addressed for children and considered usually part of education, but having a protective as well outcome. Now, this one was tagged again with disability, and when we read the update, we see that it's a very detailed point shared and introduces Amira, a new girl Muppet. So it's a kind of a character made of floor, you say, and like a marionette, no, a puppet, that's it would be in English, who speaks. So it's a very famous show in the US, but as well with other replications in other contexts, including in refugee settings. And Amira uses a wheelchair and forearm crutches to get around. And we have a picture that we extracted from a link that it was shared to further explore the information. So we could access not only what it was reported, but the materials that were developed. And we discovered that there was a session and there's a character that is called Amira, and we see a picture of the Muppet in a wheelchair, and it says at least 1 in 6 people experience significant disabilities, and it's part of a campaign, and there's episodes, etc. So we see that there's a possibility as well of sharing detailed information on content developed and give us as well access to that content, okay? We're going to see a last example that we think is very relevant because it gives an idea of the importance of highly strategic pledges. We have seen in gender, we have seen in participation, child protection, education, and we have seen one that I'm missing, I can't remember now, in strategies, right? And multi-state wide strategic frameworks. Now we see that this pledge reads the entity support to the asylum capacity support group mechanism. Now, what is this mechanism? It's a mechanism, multi-stakeholder with states, civil society, UN entities, academia, who wants to strengthen the asylum capacity of host countries. That means ensuring that asylum systems that welcome and process the asylum claims of asylum seekers and give refugee rights are strengthened, have good capacity to, for example, address situations of accessibility for persons with disabilities and other things that we will see with Elham are supported. And the update reads, this was tagged as disability inclusive. The update reads, as mentioned in our pledge, the entity has a long-standing experience as both a strong legal aid actor with a specific focus on asylum procedures, but also a global actor in the protection sector. In all protection and legal aid programming, AGD, so Aid, Gender, and Diversity, we understand considerations are an important element. A full stop. There's nothing more about how this pledge is supporting more in detail the rights of persons with disabilities. Okay. I will pass now to a very brief overview of the objectives. I've taken a long time already with the analysis, but I hope this starts brainstorming on your ideas and how you could change these type of examples, replicate, and to see the high-level outcomes of the next Global Refugee Forum. So where do we have to go in our next forum? Or should I start? I don't know, Elham, and others as well. Do you want to stop for a while? Do you want to include your section and then we continue? This is more of a dialogue.
Yeah, I think maybe, yes, because it's quite relevant to what I'm going to present. Maybe we can give it a stop if people have questions. Otherwise, we can continue with the priorities and always can talk a little bit more about the structure of GRF later, right?
Yes, and I see Mohammed Saleh Ali. I'm going to activate your microphone, and remember, we have interpretation as well to Arabic or other languages. So asking other colleagues as well to activate it if needed. Mohammed, the floor is yours. You can unmute now.
مرحبا. Welcome all. Thank you very much for this forum. Of course, I am the head of the Syrian Refugee Organization in Izmir, Turkey. I would like to say that for the disabled refugees escaping war and the deteriorated situation in Syria, Turkey had welcomed the largest number of refugees. The sound has been cut. The sound has been cut. Ladies and gentlemen, the connection of Mr. Mohammed had been cut. I cannot hear the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the call of Mr. Muhammad Saleh Ali had been cut. I cannot hear him.
I'm asking to unmute to Mohammed. Sorry, there was a problem with the sound. Yes, please go ahead. Your sound was cut, sorry.
So now you can hear me. The mechanism of education and the protection of the disabled refugees in Turkey is not sufficient. Even access to proving disability is difficult. In order to obtain a disability report due to the language because of the rights problem, and all of the refugees are under temporary protection only. I'm asking you to give priority to the third party so that the third state should give us protection because we're suffering in Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. We are going to take a second one from Paul, and we can then address questions. Thank you, Mohammed. We will answer your question. Thank you. And Paul Kitima, I'm asking you now to unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Ricardo.
Please
yes, I'm Paul Kitima. I'm the executive director of Mondeko Refugee Livelihood Center. We are based in Kampala, Uganda, and we assist in our programming. We have the protection of children with disabilities. And so far we are assisting as an organization 300 children with disabilities suffering from 6 conditions, other 6 conditions, those suffering from cerebral palsy, autism, epilepsy, Down syndrome, hydrocephalus, and microcephalus. And we have also a platform with other, which is a consortium. So in total, we have 1,200 children with disabilities. So my suggestion would be on the second pledge that you would like to develop when you are saying that about the inclusion of the refugees as well. So working with the children with disabilities, I've noticed that the challenges they are facing could be also more, we could respond to some of the challenges they are facing better by seeing how to empower also the caregivers or the parents, because that's a challenge. And as an organization, we are trying to figure out how we can involve them in livelihoods programs so that they can be more self-reliant. They can increase in the way of generating income for the households, and it will support better those children with disabilities. So I think it would be great, in my opinion, if in the pledge you captured that also, assisting also including also something about the caregivers or parents of children with disabilities as well. And lastly, I would like to thank you, to thank those who are developing the pledge. The idea of developing some content for the children with disabilities, yeah, it's great. And the idea of Amira, the Muppet, sounds great, because starting from July, we are starting to implement another program, another project about the learning experience for the children with disabilities through play. We are starting implementing that we got funding through a pooled funding, which came through one of our partners who is Reframe. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Paul. I see two more hands raised. I think we can take them all and then answer and go to the next segment. Okay. So the next one would be Sanat Kumar Bhowmik. I'm going to ask to unmute. You can now share.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo.
Welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you for giving me the chance. Actually, I will share my experiences in Cox's Bazar. You know, the biggest refugee camps are in Cox's Bazar. We are working here with more than 500 disabilities with the persons, and we are facing the challenges that you know, the camps are in hilly areas. So sometimes we are facing problems with the mobility of those disabled persons actually. And we are always trying to give them the extra support if needed. Then we are also have the inclusion policy for the organization to not only in camps, also in the other working areas. We are including more than 5% of the global Coast Foundation, and also in the working area, 100% of the disabled peoples will be included in the programs actually. So how you can suggest about the dealing of hilly areas, the disabled persons actually? We are facing a lot of problems for mobility of those people actually. Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you so much, Sanat Kumar. We will, I think, go now to address questions, because I see that Rita, there was another hand raised, but I cannot see them. Rita, would you like still to share? Otherwise, we can go. So
I think, Ricardo, someone is unmuted. They have some background noise.
no, the background noise can be from my side.
Okay.
I'm in a shared room. I'm sorry for that. So I'm going to then check when you're addressing your part as well, some questions in the chat, but just starting to share some of the points. And I'm going to share the screen again. So please pin the interpreter is pinned for me, but be sure that you are having as well them on view. So I'm going to try to address the questions while presenting the high-level outcomes for the next GRF. So the slide has now a series of 4 objectives that were reflected in the Global Compact on Refugees, and then some actions, some ideas on how these objectives can be addressed through what is called mega pledges or multi-stakeholder pledges. That means that we are coming together to a single objective that is broad, but where we can have an added value in pledging together. So the first objective is on easing pressure on host countries. Here it would be very relevant, well, first for the situation that was shared by Mohammed in Turkey, in terms of ensuring that registration and protection for refugees is ensured, but as well, I'm going to jump now to objective 3, that we have, well, I'm going to go one by one. Objective 2, actually, enhancing refugee self-reliance as well through supporting host countries with economic inclusion, so people can access employment in country, and this was as well mentioned by Paul from Kakuma, and that we have as well for those requiring additional protection who cannot find a way of being integrated in the host country, to third country solutions. That would be the third objectives, okay? And then the fourth objective would be support to safe conditions for return when possible, when it is safe to do so, preparing as well refugees to return to their countries of origin. Now, some of the actions include financing and including as well actions in climate action within host countries, given the fact that some of the host countries are in the most climate disaster prone areas. Others in self-reliance include support for host countries' policies, so development as well of systems and policies and economic inclusion, social protection schemes. For example, here would be the policy that was mentioned by Paul as a good practice of ensuring access to social inclusion for persons with disabilities who are refugees, as we are promoting social protection systems as well in these countries, and some of them are emerging in those countries or have been well developed already. The third would be the third country solution, so resettlement, family reunification, complementary pathways, that means ways of accessing tertiary studies, university studies, ways of finding a durable solution to other alternatives. Here, for example, some states, of course, this depends a lot of states, right? So making commitments for resettlement places or numbers for people who can be admitted in their countries, as well removing any discriminatory action on disability or criteria. For example, health visa requirements sometimes are requested, so waivers on those. And finally, as well in repatriation, while ensuring that there are conditions for return, that there's support, reasonable accommodation. I will try to address then for the first question, I would say that we need always to tag. Of course, this is a discussion about rights of refugees with disabilities, so resettlement should apply to them as well, and without discrimination, even if more with further attention. In terms of access to livelihoods, etc., it would be, as the second question was, a good area in objective 2. And then accessibility. This, of course, is pressure on host countries, but acknowledging as well that sometimes the development of the settings, the refugee settings, changing the infrastructure is difficult, costly, or even not allowed, prevented, right, in some situations by authorities. So here, of course, we have many disability rights experts. My own perception would be that there would be still ways of ensuring immediate solutions, reasonable accommodation, etc., but those would be ways of addressing them. Before just closing, I would like to share a website. So sorry, there's background from speaker, thank you. So there's a website that I'm going to very quickly open and navigate, is multi-stakeholder pledges. And this has been updated only 10 days ago. We are going to put a link in the chat, but you can find different types of pledges for these objectives that we've presented. And some of them will be very easy to relate to these areas. And you will find that, for example, asylum capacity strengthening is an area that Elham will explore now. We have as well social protection systems. So linking refugees is another area. So if you explore this, you will find as well who is committed, what are some of the states, Djibouti, Ethiopia, Lebanon. I'm reading just some of the states who have shared pledges, and engaging in advocacy or trying to join as well through other ways, civil society organizations who are supporting these countries to join forces. I will stop here. I spoke a lot already and hand over to Elham for the next step. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. And thank you very much, everyone, for your questions and contributions so far. So what I'm going to present is the outcome of the conversations that we have had. It basically showing what areas we think the new pledges or updated pledges, inclusive pledges, should focus on for the second Global Refugee Forum. We have categorized them into 3 sections, but of course, it's not like final. So if you feel that an important area is missing, or if you want to add anything, please feel free to raise it, whether in chat or raise your hands, and after that, we can have a conversation. So the first area that we think is very important, we have found through what we have heard from people, is, as Ricardo and colleagues were discussing, access to international protection for persons with disabilities. Here, there are 2 issues to consider. First of all, in many of the assessments to grant asylum status or refugee status, the impact of disability is not being considered or is not being considered enough. Many of persons with disabilities face additional persecution because of their disabilities, or the disability, when merged with gender or age or social status, race, or other things, actually impacts and exposes them to more discrimination, to more persecution. So they require, and are quite eligible to access more protection for that. Let me give like a couple of examples, and I'm happy to hear more examples from your side. Like, we know about people with albinism in some African countries. We had some colleague from Uganda, so I'm sure they can also talk about that, and other countries in Africa, but other contexts as well. People with albinism are specifically targeted. There are some wrong assumptions about them, like attributing them to witchcraft and things like that. And they're specifically persecuted. Even they can be subject to extreme violence or lose their lives. And we have had cases. So as one pledge, this could be like including and considering these type of persecutions when granting and assessing asylum requests. Another example is the situation of people with psychosocial disabilities or people with mental health conditions. In many countries, people with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities are subject to chaining, like being chained, like receiving electroshocks without their consent, being isolated in very bad conditions, subject to inhuman treatment, and are deprived from their very basic human rights. So it is important that when these people seek asylum or seek protection, this issue is being considered for granting asylum. So for some other groups, for example, they face specific barriers, specific discrimination and deprivation of their basic rights in their country of origin or the transition country, that needs to be considered in decisions about granting asylum to them. Another issue that needs to be considered is that in the process, like when you are applying for asylum, there are colleagues in the room who are directly refugees or have worked with refugees with disabilities. That can tell us more about that. But in the process of interviewing people for asylum, in the process of assessing the asylum requests or resettlement cases, the process itself is not fully accessible, is not inclusive. They don't give extra time to people who need it. They may not provide a national sign language interpretation of the person's choice. They may not provide the questions in accessible format. They may not consider that some people need extra break or need someone to support them. So all of these things could be subjects of pledges. As Ricardo was discussing, it is important that those pledges are specific, so clarify, not just making sure that the asylum process is inclusive. This is a great thing, but this is not enough. It should be specifically listing concrete measures that should be taken. And it should be measurable, so have some indicators. And of course, it should be inclusive, considering age, gender, and diversity. For example, in assessing disability as a ground or making sure that disability is considered in like looking at asylum processes. For example, it's important to check what extra situation is faced by women with disabilities or young girls with disabilities. Unfortunately, we have the case of young girls with disabilities being subject to specific sexual violence and abuse because of the stereotype and attitudes exist about, like, for example, that having a sexual relations with a girl, like a virgin girl, would help, like, for example, cure some disease like HIV or things like that, that makes girls with disabilities subject to specific targets for sexual violence. So these things, the intersection of disability, age, and gender should be considered. So that's the first area. The second area is access to services for those who are referred to the third country or the hosting country or in a transition temporary residence country. It is important that asylum seekers with disabilities, refugees with disabilities can access services on an equal basis with others. Ricardo did mention social protection. We can look at the access to education that requires inclusive education. For example, if there is a refugee with disability who is a sign language user, it is important that education is available for them also in their own national sign language. Or like when they are requesting services such as psychosocial support or gender-based violence support, these services are available for them in accessible format that they can actually use them. We talked about self-reliance, which is very important in terms of making sure that livelihood opportunities and self-reliance opportunities are accessible for refugees with disabilities. There is unfortunately this assumption that people with disabilities are always relying on others, are not independent and should be receiving support and charity, so they cannot be self-reliant, which is not true, and actually may end up further discrimination and exclusion for them. So it is important that these services are inclusive of refugees and asylum seekers with disabilities. For that, pledges can include, for example, target specific service, for example, social protection, gender-based violence services, education services, and so on, to become more inclusive and accessible. They can include a kind of assessment of the level of access to services. They can target access to different kinds of services for everybody. And they can also include allocation of resources to ensuring that refugees with disabilities in a certain group can access the services. So these are just some examples of making specific measurable services for persons with disabilities who are asylum seekers or refugees. And finally, the third area that we have looked at is meaningful participation. Julius mentioned how he didn't feel participating in the first Global Refugee Forum. This is just one example. So refugees with disabilities, as everyone else, have the right to be at the center of decision-makings that affect them. We have refugee-led organizations that are an important body, an important pillar on decisions that affect lives of refugees. So it is important that pledges that are being made to support these refugee-led organizations are inclusive of refugees with disabilities. For example, a pledge can say supporting 2 refugee-led organizations in X country and requesting or requiring them to ensure that at least 10% or 5%, whatever number, or not mentioning quantity number based on the context, they can also mention ensuring that refugees with disabilities can meaningfully participate in the governance of these refugee-led organizations. Also, organizations of persons with disabilities are a key component in this regard at national, regional, and global level. Right now, we are here because we in the International Disability Alliance made a pledge in the first Global Refugee Forum to support enhanced knowledge and awareness among organizations of persons with disabilities about refugees, and also among UNHCR staff and other individuals, groups, and organizations working on refugees about the situation faced by refugees with disabilities. That pledge, that commitment pushed us towards working with UNHCR, concluding a memorandum of understanding under which right now today we are hosting this webinar. So this is just one example of how a pledge can make a change. And we really hope that pledges can include allocation of resources, support, and commitments for organizations of persons with disabilities to get involved in supporting refugees with disabilities at all levels, because that would actually help refugees to integrate and to connect and establish a relationship with persons with disabilities in the host country. We all know that organizations of persons with disabilities are very stretched in terms of resources. So support for them, asking them and equipping them with the knowledge, expertise, and resources they require to expand their works to refugees with disabilities would be a game changer for the OPD, for the refugees with disabilities themselves, and also for persons with disabilities in the hosting country. So I think this is an important area that pledges can focus on for the second Global Refugee Forum. Of course, as colleagues mentioned, the multi-stakeholder pledges, or that's what somewhat they are called, mega pledges, are a key component. And if they are made in an inclusive way, can be a very important tool to realize inclusion and participation of refugees with disabilities. So I want to stop in here so that we can hear a little bit more from you. Do you think that this is a good summary of what we need the pledges? What do you think we should do to make those pledges if your respective
¿Qué deberíamos
organization?
hacer? ¿Qué deberíamos hacer? ¿Qué piensan
I don't have
ustedes
the
que
I think we have now the Spanish version coming through the English line.
English channel, yeah.
Okay, now I think
it's fixed.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so if you have any updates from your respective organization about what you have done or you're planning to do, if you have any questions, if you feel that what was presented does not summarize and we need to add some layers or issues to that, please feel free to use this time to raise your comments. Ricardo gonna help with any possible hands we have or any.
So thanks, Elham. This is Ricardo. We have 3 hands, Maud, Kirsten, and I will allow first Maud to come in, if you can unmute. Maud, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Maud? No.
Let's
Maybe
go to Kirsten for now.
I'm going to allow Kirsten Lange to speak.
Great. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Elham. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Super, great. Thank you. And thank you so much for organizing this session. I think it's been really great to hear the interventions and have an opportunity to hear these updates and think about how we can strengthen disability inclusion through the GRF. I just wanted to build a little bit on the intervention made by somebody else earlier today around children with disabilities. So children make up 30% of the world's population, but they're 40% of those forced to flee their homes, meaning that there are over 4 million children with disabilities who are displaced. And with increasingly protracted displacement, we know that many children with disabilities are living their whole childhoods as refugees. As we heard from the other speaker this morning, we also know that refugee children with disabilities face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and are among the most excluded. So, for example, we know that only 68% of refugee children are enrolled in primary school, and that this number will be even lower if we look at refugee children with disabilities. And despite this, as we saw from Ricardo earlier today, at the last GRF, 83% of pledges didn't mention children at all, or focused almost exclusively on education without considering other forms of support. So if we look at children with disabilities specifically, this would mean looking at access to support services in the community, looking at access to assistive technology, as well as mentioned already, non-discriminatory and inclusive asylum procedures and solutions. So in response to all of these issues, UNICEF has collaborated with UNHCR, Save the Children, Terre des Hommes, IOM, the CRC Committee and others in the Initiative for Child Rights in the Global Compacts to create a menu of sample pledges focused on investments in inclusive child protection, robust and inclusive social protection systems, and protective education, as well as ensuring the meaningful participation of all children. And I will share that shortly. From the UNICEF side specifically, just an update from us is that we've also developed a brief on how the GRF can deliver for and with all refugee children, including children with disabilities. So in this brief, we call for three things. Firstly, a standalone pledge for and with refugee children to invest in the systems and services that all refugee children, including children with disabilities, depend on. Secondly, application of both a disability and intersectionality lens, as well as a child sensitivity lens to any new pledge. And thirdly, engagement of children in development and implementation of pledges before, during and after the GRF, and particularly focusing on children who are most marginalised, which includes children with disabilities. So just summing up, what we're calling for as UNICEF is really a twin track approach, where any child-focused and child-sensitive pledge should be inclusive of all children, including children with disabilities, and that any pledge made to advance the rights of persons with disabilities should also explicitly recognise the rights of children with disabilities and address the specific obstacles to their inclusion. So I'll share a link to that document in the chat, and looking forward to working with you and others in the lead up to the GRF. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Elham, should we take other intervention? I see that Rita raised her hand again, and she wanted to intervene before, so maybe yes.
Especially because Kirsten's point were not just questions, were just great contributions we can hear from others.
Thank you so much. So, Rita, please go ahead.
Hello, I hope you can hear me well. My connection is very unstable today, so
Thank
that's
you
why
so
I had to lower my hand before. I am Rita Crespo. I work for the European Network on Independent Living. And one issue I wanted to raise is the question of independent living and institutionalization. Refugees with disabilities are more likely to be institutionalized due to their status as both refugees and disabled people. And in particular, this is the case for children, and as is mentioned by the speaker before, that the question of providing support in the community is key. One particular situation we've been experiencing in Europe is with the case of the refugees coming from the Russian invasion in Ukraine. There were, in particular with children, there have been large numbers of children with disabilities being moved from institutions evacuated from Ukraine into European countries. And the Ukrainian government requested at the time that these children had to stay together. But we were talking about very large institutions that no longer exist in other European countries. This created a big issue in how to host these children, how to include them in the care system in the countries. And in return, what this has caused is that children are now being returned into Ukraine and being back into institutions in Ukraine. in war zones, in conflict zones that are dangerous for their safety. So I believe it would be very interesting to include a commitment to put in place the institutionalization measures, independent living services in the community, and to prevent the institutionalization, in particular for children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. Should we try to give the floor to Maud again, and then we can address these interventions and as well some of the ones that are in the Q&A? I'm asking Maud if you want to a chance now. No. Okay. Elham, would you like to address
Yeah.
first? Yes, go ahead.
Actually, this is a very. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
That's so weird because my computer is now. Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Yes, I can.
It's very slow, so I don't know when it's muted, when it's not. Anyways, yeah, I just wanted to mention that's actually a very important point. And when we talk about access to services, that kind of includes that. But I think it's a good idea to make it a little bit more explicit that, of course, nothing being provided to support refugees with disabilities should cause violation of their rights, and reinstitutionalization, which has unfortunately happened, or even institutionalization of those who used to live in the community has unfortunately happened. So it is important to include that in the pledges that are being made to make sure that no harmful practice, including institutionalization, is being used as a way to support, and that independent living and living in the community is fully realized by hosting countries, and like even in the return situation, it should be considered as a definition of safe return, as you just were mentioning, Ricardo. So return to institution is not considered a safe return.
Thank you, Elham. And I couldn't agree more. I think this brings as well an important aspect, that is one, what can and has to be done in host countries for refugees to improve their systems, both for asylum, but as well for positions in return, so policy at large in positions in return, and how, for example, it has been seen, in particular in this context, that there was not sufficient policy and previous experience on what is the situation for children with disabilities who were in institutions, but as well adults, right? Because some of the cases may imply as well adults who may have under circumstances where they were not under a guardianship situation, the right to decide whether if they want to go back or not, but they are somehow forced to return because they don't have that right, right? Because they are under guardianship scheme. So advocating here, and that would be the role, for example, for this institution that Rita is part of, advocating with member states to ensure that they have adequate policy on returns, included, let's say, within asylum policy. Wider asylum policy would be very, very important. And it would link with what Kirsten was mentioning, right? Not only education is important, and sometimes here being very transparent in this small advocacy group, being aware as well that, of course, education is very important, but we need to ensure as well that there are other measures for protection, right? And that certain areas are not used as a tokenistic way to engage or to tick boxes on inclusion or engagement on children's rights, while undermining other more crucial systems, right? I
Yeah.
saw as well a comment from Abika in the chat on youth with disabilities, and absolutely ensuring skills development and access to income generation opportunities. The forum is an opportunity as well for youth engagement and refugee youth with disabilities as an intersecting factor as well. So that is a very good point, and I don't know, maybe more will be shared in the chat by our colleague Emily. I don't know if there's any other intervention. Julius, you have your hand raised, and I saw as well Sanat. I don't know if it was an old hand. I will first give the opportunity to Julius if you want to come in again. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ricardo, and thanks everyone. Just a brief intervention. I think is this Christina? She raised a very important point here about children with disability. I was fortunate this year to be present at the launch of UNICEF World Child Report. And I felt that given the fact that UNICEF itself recognized that there are around 200 million children living worldwide with disability, they spend only 2% of their budget. The budget of UNHCR for children with disability is even less than 2% out of that large number. I think this is something we all can advocate for UNICEF to spend, to increase its spending on the children with disability. And also, it's also a good thing if we can advocate that the World Child Report next year should be on children with disability. Because in my research, I found out that last time UNICEF ever launched a World Child Report on children with disability was in around 1981. I think it's been a long time. And it's also good that if they can, because that's the time that a limelight it can amplify their needs and the urgency of this situation. And also Eham is raised a very good point, and you as well. Refugees with disabilities should be on the table at all discussion concerning them, because on most occasions, it's still happening. There's some meetings that important decisions are taken, they are not usually there, and that make it like people take decision and then they don't hear from us what do we really need, and that is a big obstacle. No matter the good intention, if you don't hear from us what we need, you may bring something that is not really what we really need. And the need for protection reason for disability as a reason for protection is very important. That one should be our goal to advocate during this this GRF, to see that disability, I don't mind whether is it women or what type of disability, just the fact that you have a disability, just like LGBTQ community, just the fact that you are a member of that community, you can get protection. I think disability also should be included, so that because we face a lot of discrimination just based because you are a disabled person, not to talk of if you're a woman or if you have different type of disability. So those are just the area I want to intervene in. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. And some of those touch as well on a point that has been made by Dula in the Q&A on linking development, so sustainable development goals, integration, and refugee protection. Here we see again how sometimes not well-informed perceptions on refugee protection tend to see this as a more of a just a development, humanitarian related type of intervention, while some of these approaches require long-term approaches, and those are as well related to development, right? Here, coming back to tangible ways of guiding your attention and your advocacy or direct commitment, there would be, for example, enhancing refugee self-reliance. Some of the pledging areas there on economic inclusion, achieving food, agriculture, food systems, food security, higher education, all those, even sports and for inclusion and protection, right? And these could be expanded to cultural rights, not only sports, but other cultural rights are key areas where to engage over.
Yeah.
We are going to run over, time. Elham, I don't know if we should do a closing, right, as well for respect for the interpreters. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I just wanted to mention that we will be sharing, we have prepared a briefing document summarizing our priority areas, which has been also translated in French, Arabic, Spanish, and also international sign. And we're going to have a page on our website, on IDA website, to share updates about the second Global Refugee Forum. We will share all this information to everybody who registered for the event. We also have a small informal network of refugees with disabilities, forcibly displaced, and supporting OPDs. I will share the link. If your organization, if you are a refugee with disability, or you know a forcibly displaced or refugee person with disability in your network, or if you're an OPD working in this area, feel free to join that group. And that's a hub for us to share information and exchange among us, a very informal group. So that's all from my side. Please do reach out to myself, to Ricardo, to Emmy and Greta. All of us are working on this topic. If you have any updates or want to collaborate on any specific topic, feel free to reach out to us. I also want to thank my colleagues in the logistic team, especially Alexandra. I want to thank the interpreters, sign language interpreters, captioner, and everyone else, and all of you for dedicating your time, to Julius, to Ricardo, to Emmy and Greta for their support to make this possible. And let's work together for a more inclusive Global Refugee Forum. Ricardo, do you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you again.
Yeah.
It has been
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we can stop the recording. I think, Alexandra, thank you so much.
Yes, yes.